Hello, my name is Professor Tim Williams from the UCL Institute of Archaeology in London, and I'm going to talk a little bit about Central Asian cities along the Silk Roads, partly describing some of their characteristics and their significance and importance, but also discussing some of the issues we have with managing these historic cities in the 21st century. Cities are a crucial aspect of Central Asian culture and heritage. As the Organization of World Heritage Cities says, it is cities where human populations are concentrated and that cultural traits of people are expressed. The future of humanity is fundamentally linked to the development of urbanization. Briefly, I'm going to discuss the character of Central Asian cities, their special and unique characteristics. The cities of Central Asia have been shaped by many different civilizations and the impact of the Silk Roads. Cities formed a linking role, markets, a network of interactions, and there's perhaps 500 major historic towns and cities across Central Asia, ranging from mega cities like Merv to substantial regional centres. These cities reflect the wealth, power, art, culture, and so much more of the complex civilizations that rose across this vital region. We have some staggering architecture within these Central Asian cities, driven by that power and wealth generated through Silk Roads interactions. Here at Bukhara, for example, we have the wonderful Samanid Mausoleum from the 10th century, beautiful brick structure, and this fine mosque within the centre of the town with one of the halls or reservoirs in front of it. Crucial parts of a complex urban landscape, and one that is really quite staggering that we have this level of survival. Or here, the wonderful glazed dome interior of one of the mausolea at Kunurigench in Turkmenistan. Not all of the cities have survived so well. Indeed, many were destroyed during the Mongol conquests in the 13th century and never recovered. Here a lovely range of phenomenal archaeological sites in modern-day Kazakhstan, but it shows you the quality and survival of these early medieval cities, most of which have yet to be fully or even partially archaeologically explored. Otra perhaps being the exception here, with some relatively recent excavations. The city that I've been working with extensively is the large settlement at Merv in modern-day Turkmenistan, and here satellite imagery and drones, unmanned aerial vehicles, are helping us to map the city in detail. So again, another city destroyed by the Mongols, this time in 1221, and largely not resettled, but it's a combination of cities starting from the 6th century BCE through the amazing Seleucid city of Antiochus Margiana, which is on the right hand side of this shot, and then that through the Parthian, Greco-Bactrian, Sasanian eras until the arrival of Islam, and then the construction of a whole new city, Sultan Kala, on the left of the image, on the other bank of the river, with the old city becoming a suburb. And we can see an amazing amount of detail in this aerial image, We can see the central canal and the walls of the city, but we can also see some detail of the individual buildings within that. And excitingly, as we zoom in here, an area down by the South Gate, drones are giving us the ability to map and remap under different conditions this landscape. We can see more and more detail, the canal on the right hand side, the city wall at the bottom, and you can begin to see the details of individual streets and blocks of housing and important buildings with their courtyards. But if we look at this with a digital elevation model constructed very rapidly from the aerial photography taken by the drone, we begin to see the real relief of this jump out. You can see the city wall and the canal very clearly, but you can also now see quite a lot of this, the images of the streets winding through, the lighter areas being buildings alongside those streets, and massive open areas, courtyards within the middle. We're probably looking at this area down by the south gate of the city being largely warehouses, caravanserais, khans, markets and bazaars, rather than full residential areas which are beginning to develop slightly further to the north. And these vitally important Silk Road cities exist within complex hinterlands, river deltas. For example, the ones here are really the very important river valleys coming down from the mountain ranges into the Kizilkum Desert and creating the deltas which support Samarkand and Bukhara, and then on to the Oxus River, the modern day Amandarya, and again another fertile zone full of archaeology. And these landscapes, again, we're just really beginning archaeologically to be able to explore many of these. There's been field surveys for the last 100 years and targeted excavations, but the advent of satellite imagery and aerial photography has really opened up the opportunity to explore very large landscapes. Here at Otra, we're looking at a really amazing array of canal systems which were designed, fed off of the main river channel, designed to provide fertile agricultural areas to support these great cities and also to supply the water to the city itself. In this talk, I'm going to explore some of the issues around historic living cities on the Silk Roads of Central Asia and how these are managed, some of the challenges that are presented, and how we preserve and work with this amazing heritage within the context of communities who are living in the 21st century and have 21st century needs and priorities. These historic urban landscapes are also imbued with complex intangible heritage. The festivals, the dress, the dance, the music, the food that is eaten, the way of life, all of which are crucial to understanding and preserving and presenting and engaging with these historic urban landscapes. Cities develop and redevelop themselves, fashioning new identities. So what we need to explore is, what is the value of heritage to those 21st century urban communities? As the director of the city of Poitiers in France says, cultural heritage is what makes the difference between the cities, and it creates identity and pride. It is an opportunity for economic development and the image of the city. And I think this issue about identity, pride, sense of place, distinctiveness, the difference between one city and another. That's so important. Why Khiva and Bukhara and Samarkand are so different as places to visit, to experience, to engage in, to live in. Today, many people have an interest in living and working within historic cities. That sense of place that they bring, that sense of identity, perhaps of belonging, and the lure of street life and the culture of cities. In the past 20 years, rapid economic development has taken place across Asia, and this presents major challenges. How can conservation, economic development, social welfare, environmental conservation, and other major urban policies be integrated? Town administrators face the realities of modern life, and particularly the pressures on old urban historic cores, overpopulation, decaying infrastructure, the pressure of tourism, real estate speculation, the need to provide 21st century transportation. Obstacles are found on all continents, and we need to look at how we can develop effective policies for historic quarters. Cities are likely to undergo massive transformations, creating irreversible demands on limited heritage resources. It's going to be difficult to reconcile the interests of development with heritage conservation, particularly pressing in the issue of urban growth and regeneration. There are broader challenges as well. Urban expansion, its impact both upon those failed or abandoned cities, but also in terms of the heritage within the suburban and rural areas. There's massive issues to do with rural depopulation as well, as people are drawn into these cities and their infrastructures. Another important factor is the climate crisis, which impacts not only cities but entire countries. There are a variety of issues affecting Central Asia, not least the so-called Third Pole, the melting of the glaciers along the Himalayas, Hindu Kush mountain ranges, and their impact on river systems, both into South Asia, into China, and into Central Asia, where we see both periods of drought and stream beds drying out for much of the year, but also episodes of high flooding with all of the consequent impacts that that has upon communities. Tourism has multifaceted impacts upon Central Asian cities. It's significant for its economic impact within many historic towns. But there's also a danger, as we see across most of the world, that conservation becomes shifted from locally inspired needs and requirements towards and directed to the interests of tourism. The relationship between tourism and conservation becomes a relationship dedicated to the visitor's need. Now, while this is understandable, particularly in the context of the huge economic impact that tourism to historic cities in Central Asia has, it's something we need to be aware of in terms of the context of the work we undertake in trying to conserve these important centres. We're all aware of the impact that the COVID-19 pandemic has had upon tourism in general, and specifically in terms of the impacts on tourism within Central Asia, the decline, the uncertainty, the impacts that it has on so many people working in all those different tourist-related sectors, and how we rebuild from this, how we go forward in a post-COVID or a managed COVID world is going to be fundamental to how we harness the powers of tourism within Central Asian historic cities. So we can see that heritage and contemporary urban communities live in a complex interrelationship. Heritage can sometimes be seen as imposing restrictions, planning and development controls, making it difficult to change the infrastructure, the street size, the access to services. But it also brings a quality of life, a sense of place, a belonging, economic opportunities. And as heritage professionals, how we involve the residents of these cities, how we engage them in the decision-making processes around the future of historic cities in the 21st century is surely one of the most crucial challenges we have before us. As a starting point, I think we need to consider how our concept of urban landscapes are determined by how we experience space and architecture, and thus how we value heritage. I've been very influenced by the work of Kevin Lynch in his amazing book, The Image of the City. Primarily an architect, an urban planner, but very useful in thinking about how people in urban situations orientate themselves by means of mental maps. Every citizen has a long association with some part of the city, and this image is soaked in memories and meanings. Thus, urban space is not just composed of its physical characteristics, the material fabric of the city. It is a space that is socially produced. It's produced in the minds of its inhabitants, of its visitors, of people who interact and travel through that space. And that's what generates its values. A lot of these are reflected in UNESCO's recommendations on historic urban landscapes. It's been a lot written over the last decade or so of this whole guide to living in historic cities and managing historic cities. How do we create resilient cities capable of sustaining and developing their inhabitants? We need urban heritage and development to be seen as complementary strands of an approach to creating vibrant 21st century urban communities. And I'd just like to draw attention to a project that we're undertaking at the moment, the Central Asian Archaeological Landscapes Project, with the generous funding of Arcadia, a charitable foundation of Elizabeth Rawsing and Peter Baldwin, working with partners across Central Asia, including the International Institute of Central Asian Studies based in Samarkand, creating a digital geospatial inventory of sites across Central Asia. Not just cities, but pulling together that platform of information which may help us manage these cities more sustainably into the 21st century. Thank you very much for your attention.